You've mentioned a bunch of things. You said
Mm.
addiction, compulsion, eating disorder, relationships, BFRB, the trichotillomania. Does it ever stop? Is there ever a graduation?
I love that question. Is there ever graduation? As I'm told in the rooms for recovery, we never graduate. But I've always wanted to know,
Right.
like, what's wrong with me so I can fix myself. But 10% of the time I still go to that stuff, which is why, like, to answer your question, I never graduate because I'm still gonna sometimes go to that faulty wiring. And so I just keep coming back, as they say.
Abby, you're telling us so much about your past, and there was something that just really perked my ears.
Hmm.
You said fight, flight. The next one is freeze, and there's another one I recently learned called fawn as well. Can you tell us a little bit about those? Did they affect you?
Mm. Yes, I've learned I'm a freeze fawn type. Um, you know, I've subsequently learned, yeah, it comes from childhood. And, it's what you learn to do to survive if you come from a dysfunctional family system. And it's dangerous. And, we're all animals, just like animals out in the wild. And in the face of a predator or danger, our survival instinct kicks in, and that's different for everybody. I learned for me, it's freeze and fawn. I had to learn that as a kid with my mother, and if I could manage her, if I could chameleon myself and make her emotions okay, make her feel better, then there was less danger for me. And so then that carried, and I learned how to do it really well. And it became actually a very strategic skill for me, especially in Hollywood, where there's a lot of big personalities. And I was able to, quote unquote, manage them so they wouldn't lose their minds a lot. So I became known as a person who could deal with some of the most challenging and difficult personalities and artists in our business. So I really have benefited from it as an adult, but I've learned that I have to also be careful and protect myself. That's the most. Now I don't do it to the point of hurting myself, which is what I did for a really long time. Because what I thought was happening, everybody would be like, "Oh, you're tough as nails. You can deal with all these screamers." And in Hollywood for a really long time, bullies and screamers and really bad behavior and throwing things was accepted if you were talented. And you're a creative genius. You're allowed to behave however you want to behave. And for a lot of people, they'll go into a job with a screamer. They'll be like, "I'm out of here." And I used to be like, well, they just can't hack it. And now I'm like, oh no, they were just healthy, because I would either freeze or fawn. I remember there was one time with Harvey in the beginning, and it was like we'd been called to the Peninsula, the hotel he would stay in LA, on a Sunday at like 7 in the morning. And it was me and like three or four of my colleagues. And he was in a bad mood and he was raging, raging, raging. Uh, and to me, it was I thought it was a really stupid reason. Like, a woman had come to the door. She was a doctor. She didn't look like a doctor to some of us, which is whatever that is. And my friend didn't let her in fast enough, my colleague, and Harvey just went crazy and just started screaming at her. And I started laughing because I thought it was funny. But it was it was that freeze, nervous laughter response, sort of. But I did genuinely think it was funny because I was frozen on the inside. I wasn't
Hmm.
feeling the screaming. And then he, pointed his beady little eyes at me and was like, "Do you think this is funny, Abby? Do you think it's fucking funny that I have idiots working for me?" And I was able to do that like theater thing of just like go completely blank and be like, "No, Harvey, I don't think it's funny at all." And, I was rewarded for it. Then he was like, "All right, you're going to the Golden Globes tonight. You're going to sit at a table inside the ballroom and I'm going to watch you. You're going to work the room." And so I was like literally immediately rewarded for my ability to be frozen and fawn at the same time. And, that's just one example of many where, I use those to my benefit. But then later on, I learned like it does go somewhere, right? As who says it? Is it Bessel van der Kolk and Body Keeps the Score? Like the issues in the tissues, like, that yelling, all of that. that stuff, it gets stuck, right? If you're not processing it, if you're not reacting to it, it eventually gets stuck in the body. So I've learned, like, now when I'm around, because I still work in Hollywood, and a lot of my business now, is this: I get hired independently on series that are in trouble and need help. So I'm still working with challenging personalities, and now I do react in the moment. I set a boundary. I'm like, this is unacceptable behavior. If it's been a really highly activated day and there's been a lot of yelling and screaming around me, like, I go home and do a lot of work to process it and make sure that, like, it's not staying in the body. I'm not pushing it down with things. I'm not going home and, like, drinking a bottle of wine. I'm like going home and doing some yoga and moving it through my body, or doing some writing, or calling a fellow or somebody safe and talking about what happened. And I'm really cognizant of, like, not letting this stuff hurt me.
Unbelievable. Freeze. I mean, I'm a freeze and a fawner. And I think I used to be a flighter. I used to just be
uh,
like, I'm out. Shh. Any bit of conflict, I'd just end the relationship immediately, romantic relationships, long before I was married. And I just was like, I was even backpacking around the world in my 20s, and it was just any like little bit of discomfort was like, I'm leaving the country. I'd go, location, location, location. And everywhere I would arrive, I'm like, this is the place. You know what? I think I can live here. And then 2 days later, I was like, nope, I'm out. Next, next, constantly searching. And the freezing, just being afraid of yelling and shouting and conflict and confrontation. Oof, God, it's just incredible. I've had to do a lot of work on that. And still I just want to be, quiet. And it takes me a while to process. And
mhm.
I want to get to the fawn in a second, but I got to ask you a really important question. Do you drive a manual transmission car? Okay.
No, I have a choice of making it easier for myself. I'm already, like, driving a stick in my body. I
Right.
want easy where I can.
Okay, because you said earlier, I was like, whoa, does she drive stick? As they say in America, stick, manual in Europe. Um, yeah, no, it was a great analogy. So fawn, can you, because that one, I learned that one later. It's usually the
Mm,
first three: fight, obvious, flight, freeze, and then there's the other trauma response, fawn, which I just
mhm.
learned like, I don't know, a couple of years ago. Can you explain what fawn is, what that means, and how it works?
Yeah, fawn is, as my understanding, is if you make the other person who's being abusive feel good about themselves or feel good, then they won't be abusive. For example, I've worked with an actress who, when she would get activated, like, she was nervous to perform, and was not happy with the directors. Her response was a fight response, and she would, like, you know um, lash out at people around her. A lot of times it was me. And I knew better with what I thought was her personality structure to really confront her in the moment. Like, it wasn't going to be safe for me to do that because it would result in more abuse. And so I would coddle, essentially,
Hmm. Yeah.
and be like, you're so right, like, this is horrible, you're being treated horribly. And I did that, like, the first time I was working with this person, and then I learned that that was hurting me, because what would happen, I'm not using my voice, I'm not being authentic, like, I am pushing down my real feelings. And that, like you said, like, only later when I, like, have like, a delayed reaction of, like, hey, that wasn't okay, I'm feeling resentful. So a way to not feel resentful, and then I'm going to want to use something to put that resentful feelings. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be doing that. So I started doing it differently, which was, instead of fawning, I would be keep my nervous system really regulated and just say, I understand that you're upset, but this is the situation. We have no control over changing it, changing out the directors in that moment. What what resources do you need to do your job without taking it out on other people? And what becomes the result, the fear of, the reason why I think a lot of people fawn, or why I fawn, is because if you tell the truth, then there's a potential for either more abuse or for someone to abandon you. But I have learned, okay if someone who's abusive abandons me. They shouldn't be in my life anyway, you know? And in a work situation for me, then it's more scary because, like, oh, then I am alienating the people I'm meant to manage and control. But I've also learned, like, I need to have faith that the situation will take care of itself better if I take care of myself. And that has been the situation. I ended up really distancing myself from this actress. Um, and like we used to be very, very close. And then she got very angry when I told the truth. She stopped speaking to me. And guess what? I didn't have that constant need for supply. I'm trying not to, as my therapist has told me, you can't pathologize people. You're not a therapist. It's not your job or your role to pathologize. So I'm avoiding using like what I think are, or the diagnoses. So I'm just saying I didn't have to be constantly supplying her with this false sense of coddling, which was inevitably hurting me. And so, we weren't close, but like I still was able to get my job done. That faith did work out. I was still able to get my job done and not be hurting myself in the process. So it's enough of those experiences where like maybe abandonment happens, fine, but I'm so much better off in the long run.
You nailed it. You said some key things: abandonment, afraid of more conflict. So I fawn and tell the other person, oh, no, you're right. I'm wrong. No, no, no. Oh, you're the best. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Even though when I don't need to be sorry, I didn't do anything. I just want to make sure that person is whole and okay, just so that I can be safe again. And then later on, it pops up somewhere later as a resentment, and I go quiet and I go cold, and I don't want to talk to anyone. And then I am fuming and icing people out. So I act out in other ways like that, and the great leap is what you said, is to, I've got to look after myself, and that's not acceptable behavior. And but from a place of love, though. Otherwise, if I go to the other end of the pendulum,
Right.
by working on this so much, which did happen to me, I can be in the fight area, and I want to win, and I want to go and argue, and no, and it can sometimes feel a little bit liberating to really have a voice all of a sudden. But then dial it back into the middle. On one side, I'm a doormat, I'm a people pleaser. On the other side, I could be aggressive. So having that middle stage, and I'm not a therapist, and what did you say, pathologize? I do that all the time. And diagnose, I do that as just one of my things. It's not me, it's you. So this is such deep work you've done. This is really deep, and I feel like no, I mean, I just want to say a world generalization. I'm not going to do that. I keep wanting to say that, but it sounds like you've gone through a lot of painful experiences to be able to get to a place
Mm,
where you can have a voice and talk to people who everyone else is probably afraid of in the room. Like
yeah.
the room is probably full of fawners and freezers, because that's what they attract. The others, but you're able to have integrity and then go and reintegrate, when you get out in your own space later back to you. That's whew, what a lot you do there.
Thank you for saying that. And yeah, but that's the gifts we get. That's the real cash and prizes if we
Yes.
do the deep, painful work. I can be in any space with any person and personality and not be afraid because I have all these new tools and resources to take care of myself. Like I feel like I'm finally an adult, right? Because it's the kid in me, that wounded kid who's, oh, you hurt me. I need to make myself feel better. Like I'm going to go eat XYZ because I know that's going to give me that immediate relief, right? That's the kid response. So I can be like, understand and be loving towards that. But I now can be an adult and be like, and take care of myself and hold up a boundary. And then I'm not lying. It's not trite to say, like, my business has grown by doing this because I can go into very complicated situations and deal with people who are like, I went on a show in the fall where two parties who need to get along on a TV series were in a war and they weren't speaking to each other. And they were both complicated, beautiful children of God. And I was able to go in and assess the situation and have hard conversations with each of them. It doesn't mean that I'm necessarily right. It just means like I try and take that like you said, unactivated view. I'm not in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And if one of them, because inevitably situations were happen, one of the people raged out at me, and I don't respond in the moment. When I notice that I've been totally activated, when like I'm in a really high conflict conversation and I've been kicked into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, I just get myself to safety. I get myself to safety. I get myself, calm down. And I usually do a lot of work. I'm like, okay, what's my part in that situation of how it got to that place? I sort that out. And then it's like, okay, what do I need to do action wise to like repair? Either, take, responsibility for my side of the street and also set a boundary with the other person. This is unacceptable behavior. And in that situation, I needed to escalate it to like higher levels, and ask for help. Like that's something I never knew how to do. It was like only on me to take care of myself and only on me to ensure my own survival. And now I've learned to ask for help. And I have people that I trust enough to ask for help. I have an agent, and maybe not everybody trusts their agent, but mine has like fully shown up, and he called the head of the studio that we were working for and it was like, what the fuck is going on there? And so that's huge for me. That's all new stuff I've learned to like how to be an adult in adult complicated situations.
So I gotta ask you this, Abby, with all this progress, do you ever have a slip where you might go into fawn or freeze and then not realize it, and then later wonder like, why am I feeling so shitty or something, and later you realize it? It's just kind of,
Yeah.
it just creeps up and you're in it. Do you ever
Yeah.
have that?
Oh, all the time. Yeah. Because like I said, 90% of the time I'll go to my, healthy tools, and then 10% of the time I'll go to the old ones. So I'll
Mm.
notice like if I feel bad because I'm not still in the I'm not in the beverage program. The DUI was I drove into DUI checkpoint. It really had more to do with my inability to. I'm both a people pleaser and like a straight A person, but also have this wild like flaunting of authority. So it really was more around getting right sized around who I am and the rules of the world and how they apply to me. Anyway, so I'll notice that if I'm drinking more in a social situation, it is because I am uncomfortable, or there's feelings that have come up, or I'm around people that are making me uncomfortable, or I'm just feeling uncomfortable. No one's doing anything to me. And that's when I'm like, ooh, that didn't feel good. I gotta sort of examine like what was going on there that I felt that I needed to like take the edge off. So yeah, I will never graduate. I still want the easier, softer way, as they say in the rooms. And yeah, that's why I'm constantly working. And I'm doing something really vulnerable right now. I'm moving from just producing into writing. And there is nothing more vulnerable than like I am finding than the writing process or any creative process of putting something out there. Kudos to you for creating this, which is about really vulnerable things. And I find I get very triggered quite a lot, in the creative process. And so I find myself all the time having to like examine what's going on. My perfectionism is like my number one character. What strategy is what I've learned to call them, not character defects.
I like that. Character strategy. I'll keep that.
Yeah. So like I'm constantly being, confronted by my own stuff all the time. So yeah, I'm constantly learning and growing.
So, Tom, you said your greatest character strategy is perfectionism. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah. Again, back to the childhood stuff, which is like wah wah, but it is true. Um, as a kid, if I could just perform perfectly, in the beginning, it was really my mother was trying to get me to act and like be a performer, very much the classic stage mom situation. But when I developed the trichotillomania, that really dashed her dreams of me, being a little actress. and I didn't want to do it anyway. I've always wanted to be behind the scenes. I hated it. I hated it. And but then it became like, okay, but if I performed in other ways, like, and performed outstandingly, not just perfectly, outstandingly, then I would be loved. That's what I've learned is the underlying of all of it. And so, always wanted to be like, out top of the class. I wanted to be, because I couldn't perform. I've never said this before, I think out loud to other people, but I couldn't perform like in acting stuff. So my mother was having me perform in synagogue. So, I was reading Torah and Haftorah at the high holidays, which I grew up in Chicago in a really big synagogue. So then I was in front of hundreds of people I was performing. Uh, and so had to nail that, couldn't make a mistake. And that's carried over through everything I want to do. And now as I'm writing, I'm finding that comes up a lot. Right. And if you're writing, everyone says, you got to have the shitty first draft. So I've really had to confront my perfectionism around that shitty first draft, and learning a craft and being okay with learning and growing and not being so great to start with and getting better every time I do it more. And it's painful. It's painful.
So at Dimples, we've been manufacturing, selling hair for over 55 years, and most of our business has been salons, salons. Now we're
Mhm.
selling direct to consumer. Now we're feeling more connected than ever. I've had many conversations with salon owners over the years, and they'll call me up directly and say, "Hey, I got to get this wig. It's usually a very long one, and they'll tell me who it's for. They'll say it's for a teenage girl. I've got to get it right, and they'll usually tell me what it is, why she's getting it, and
Mhm.
a lot of times it's because of trick. And I started to hear that, yeah, her mum's gonna be there. She's got to be with the mother, and then I started to ask when they would call me. The other ones would call me. I'm like, does this young lady have a very strong mother? And they're like, oh yes, every time. I started to hear that, the perfectionism. She's all these things that you're getting put into, and reading the Haftarah in front of a ginormous synagogue. That must have been terrifying. How did that make you feel when you had to do that?
That's what the genius of all of these addictions and compulsions. I didn't feel anything. I was pretty numb. They worked really well.
Oh
So,
wow.
yeah, I was just so focused on achieving, and I didn't make a lot of mistakes. When I did, of course, it was devastating. But yeah, I told you I didn't really feel a lot of fear because I was so numb. I
Mm,
did feel very devastated because everything was clouded by my obsession around my body, my hair. I would spend these. I feel this is also why I'm doing this. I feel for every child who's going through trick. I mean, the hours and hours I would spend camouflaging. Um, I mean, I didn't go to salons for a really long time to cut my hair. I started with eyelashes and eyebrows, and I remember stealing Crayola crayons from the art class to draw in my eyebrows. I wouldn't go swimming because it would wash off. So, and then in high school, when I had moved from the eyelashes and eyebrows to my head hair, the hours in the morning, I would get up early to do my hair in a very specific way to hide the bald patches. And that's where I focused all of my all my emotion came into that. God forbid if somebody would say anything to me about bald spots, it was like I was dying. It was so intolerable. So, I really feel for these kids, and that's a great resource if they can afford it to get toppers and wigs to be able to alleviate some of that anxiety. Unfortunately, we're just not in a society yet that can just be super accepting, even though 3% of the population has a BFRB. It's a lot more common than people understand.
do you think they know that 3% have it? How many of that 3% do you think know that they have it?
I
Is it a
have no
conscious act? Is it Sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, 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 no. It's these are all good questions. I don't know. I don't think a lot of people still do, but luckily now we have Google, So
Yeah.
people can just type in if they have that. There are tons of resources now. There's the TLC, Trichotillomania Learning Center, which is an incredible organization, which has so many support groups. And that's actually how I found HP, how I found a 12-step program for hair pulling was through the TLC, even though I looked for it before, it didn't exist. Now it does. And so I think it's a lot easier for people to put a name to what's happening for them nowadays than it was before. But I think a lot of people still don't know, and it's such a disease of isolation and shame. And, I wish for everyone who is afflicted with this compulsion, that they could know that they're not alone.
When you started, you said in the beginning it was your eyebrows and your eyelashes.
Hmm.
Were you aware that you were pulling out the hair when you were doing it, or did it take some time? Was it an unconscious thing or a conscious thing?
Sort of both. I know for a lot of people, they go into a trance and like they don't even realize they're doing it until afterwards, and they have the piles of hair everywhere. For me, it's I would go into a sort of a trance state, but once I started, like I was powerless over it, but like I was conscious of it. Um, yeah, I mean, it's more conscious, now. Like while I haven't arrested it completely, now it's totally conscious. Now I have what they call the God pause. And it's like, I know, like once my hands go to my hair and I start feeling my hair for that, like one crooked hair, the like, that's when the disease voice starts of like, well, just one hair. It's like it's a hair that needs to go. It's a gray one. Like it's got to go. The second I start listening to that voice is like when I'm in trouble. Like, but now I have like some time, um like some people call it a God pause, to like make a decision to use a new tool to disrupt the urge. But it's tough. It's like that urge is more powerful than any all of my other compulsions and addictions combined.
I love what you said. The pause, the great pause, or the God pause. You said
God pause.
the God
Hmm.
pause, and the I'm thinking of a, I want to say the show. I don't know if you're watching it.
Uh-huh.
Um, God, I just went blank my mind. It's in the 80s, and it's about food. She's compulsively eating, and it's on. Someone's watching this and getting this right now.
Okay.
It's with the actress from Bridesmaids. Oh my
Oh,
god.
physical, Rose Byrne.
Physical. I
Yeah.
dressed up as her for Halloween with a huge wig on and a leotard. It was hilarious, by the way. I just remembered. But in physical, have you seen Physical?
Yeah. I really like it.
I'm up to date. I'm on season 3 watching it, or 4, whatever it is.
Hmm.
And in the beginning, it's not a spoiler if anyone wants to watch it. What Abby's talking about, that inner voice, that really powerful inner voice, you see this actress portray it so well as she looks at herself in the mirror, locked in the bathroom, and her husband's banging on the door, and she's locked herself in the bathroom, and she's, look at you, you're so ugly, you're so this, you're so, and it's that inner voice just like pounding her. And
Hmm.
I relate. I totally relate. So I was like, God, this is, I got to keep watching this. Hers is the food thing, and you also said that you've had a little bit of experience with the food
Hmm.
side of things. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that also, I'm so intrigued about hearing that too.
Yeah, I mean, that was the focus. That's what got me into my first recovery program, is because of
Mm,
that voice. I mean, I was doing such crazy shit with food and exercise right before I got in. Like, I relate to that. I mean, I've never seen it depicted so well as it is in physical, right? Like, and it's saying that to her because she's just binged usually, right? And she's just like gone on a giant binge and gone to the fast food, and then that voice, you've got the physical discomfort, which is then like starting the voice of whatever it is says to each person, you're a piece of shit, look at your thighs, look at your this, look at your that, I can't believe you've done that, like you're a piece of shit, like now you're never going to get X, Y, and Z. And it's that whole narrative that just goes and goes and goes, and it's so powerful. And then once you get help in whatever modality you get help in, you learn it is a voice, and there's that distance of the real you, as if anybody does IFS, Dr. Richard Schwartz, that's internal family systems work. He calls it like the capital S of self. And like the real self can observe whatever this is. I think he would call that like a manager or a firefighter, that part of you that's like coming up to, to take care, like a thwarted impulse to take care of the like inner child. It's like now we're taking charge, and this is what we got to do. Like we got to go throw this up. And that voice is just so powerful, but it was there for a reason. I've learned you grew it for a reason at a certain point. So now I don't think of it as like something bad. I think of it as something that just like a, what do they call it? Maladaptive coping mechanism.
Yeah, exactly. I've heard different names for the voice, the ego, the trauma voice, or and all these other kind of voices. And I heard of places they would say, "Oh, you got to smash the ego," and But I realized, like I guess you did too. That voice was my only protector. It was like the way that as a little boy, that voice was there to had the only solutions it could come up with until I became an adult and conscious and had a experiences where I could see that voice and eventually have that pause and be like, oh hey, good to see you over there. Hey,
Yeah.
thanks for joining us. Just to have that step back and see it and then not believe it. Just be like, it's okay. We don't need you right now. It's like a whole rewiring of the brain, and it goes back to what you were saying about the fight and the flight, because that's what I'm wired to do. And I've also heard that it can be brought through family lineages, especially families who have been through like holocausts and things like that. It can go on to generation and generation until someone stops it. Someone has the is ready and wanting to do that. I don't know if there's been any studies on that yet, if it does stop it from generating. We're so curious to hear that, if it
Yeah.
exists. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, totally. Well, I can even see it in my own family, right? Like my parents intended to be, good parents, right? And I just look at where they came from, and they're miles ahead of, where they came from. And so the fact that I can even be healthy enough to, and they're the ones who put me in therapy so young. So that's what they were trying, So my interest in all of this stuff is because they were doing it better than the people before them. So I can even see it with myself, in our own family lineage. And I think the younger generation have these such, like Gen Z and Alpha, have these such strong boundaries and are such revolutionaries because they were parented better, I think, than the
Mm.
people before them. I think we're seeing it even anecdotally because they're like, look at what they're doing in my industry alone. They're like, oh, we don't tolerate abuse. We are not going to intern for free. We're not going to, do work on the weekends for not getting paid. So things are, even from a generation, I don't even know, what am I, 2 generations away from the people who are assistants now? Like they're doing it totally differently. And I think that is a testament to, we're watching it in real time, the like healthier recovery, healthier family systems.
That's a brilliant. I've never thought of it like that. You're right. This generation and the last one or last half, yeah, it's like has a voice,
Oh,
and yeah, has a voice. And prior generations didn't have that. You're absolutely right. Yeah. So you said something about you did. I don't know what year it was. Maybe you can tell me what year it was. You did this amazing show, this production, and then you went home to tell your mum and dad and show your mum and dad, and your mum said something that wasn't maybe what you wanted to hear. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
that moment. It was just like one of those confluence of events. It was a lot of things that weekend. It was the fact that my sister and I didn't want to go there. Again, talk about not having a voice. I should have said it. I had 2 jobs. It was the weekend. It was a long weekend in January. It was right before the Sundance Film Festival. It was the week before we were starting production on my television show. So I had these 2 giant full-time jobs, and I have the time to go visit. And I had said I was really busy, but like I didn't have, again, I succumbed to the guilt to come down. And so I was at my wit's end. I was so afraid. I wasn't taking care of myself well because I was working so much. And we were down at my parents' best friend's house, our family best friends, and seeing that mother who I've known forever side by side next to my mother. And like she had asked me, she noticed that I was like a little afraid. And she's like, "Are you okay? Are you taking care of yourself?" And like that she was attuned to me and what was going on with me. And my mother didn't, that would never be cross her mind. And just the side by side, it was something like the curtain was just moved aside. Finally, I was ready to see what was really going on. And I want to be really clear, don't blame my parents. You know, I can see now and have compassion for where they came from.
Hmm.
However, I did have to go through a process of processing the rage around, you know, what had happened to me. But I've gotten to a place of compassion now. And it was just the straw that broke the camel's back of like the rejection of the way I see it now is like this poor kid who's just like working, you know, herself to the bone to like provide these like tokens of achievement to my, you know, parents of like, well, look at me, love me. And then to be rejected, it was like it just felt like the ultimate rejection, and it just set off this, you know, new road of recovery.
Again, I can relate. Look what I did. Do you love me now? Am I good enough now? And it's a whole journey of, for me it was reparenting, and not needing to get that outside of myself, because and then even if I did get that outside, good job, good job, I couldn't take the compliment. I wasn't able to take it, so it's like I lose on both sides. Trying so long to get this compliment and I get it, I'm like, no, no, no. It's so strange and baffling. So are you able, you said earlier about crying. Are you
Mm.
able to access tears now, or is it still a
Oh yes,
tough
oh
thing? Really?
yes, yes,
Awesome.
oh
I'm
yes,
so I'm
yeah.
so jealous of you.
Well, it's been a long process of
Uh-huh.
allowing that. It was a crazy, I thought my brain was broken for those years that I was going through this deep trauma recovery. Like I just remember one time I was woken up in the middle of the night crying. I'm like, what? Like my intellectual mind was like, this is ridiculous. Who wakes himself up crying? What is going on? I couldn't believe it. And that's when I started writing. It was such a weird, I like heard a voice so strongly in my head be like, go to your laptop and just start writing. And I
Mm.
was like, it was like one of those, like you hear out of like the Bible with Moses. I was like, I'm not, I don't believe in those stories really. But so to have that experience, a spiritual experience like that, of like, go write. And so I'm like crying. I'm like, this is my conscious self is like, this is a ridiculous scenario that's happening. I can't stop myself from crying. This is ridiculous. Okay, I will go to my laptop. And I just started writing my story. And after 20 or so minutes, I calmed down and I stopped crying. And I was like, that's really strange. And I went back to bed. And that was the start of actually me moving into more creative writing. That was in like probably 2017 ish. But ever since that process, I don't now cry spontaneous. I feel like this iceberg of emotions has mostly subsided, but I will. It's like you were saying, it's not necessarily always in the moment. Like something will happen, I'll get activated in some way, I'll want to take the edge off, and then I go to therapy and we talk through what happened, and then the tears usually start flowing and we get to whatever, you know, as she calls it, whatever trauma pocket has been hit. And I always ask like, when are we done with the trauma pockets?
Mm. Yeah, the tears. It's I just was meditating on this couch yesterday, and
Mm-hmm.
yesterday at the end of the day in my office, and tears just came out in the meditation, and I felt so good after. And yeah, we just grew up where it just wasn't. We don't cry. It's like, no, only show joy and happiness and the good stuff. And I used to pride myself by being able to not cry at like funerals, and watching Schindler's List and not crying even with the sad endings of the whole movie. I was like, not gonna cry, not gonna cry. And now I have to intentionally like catch, I'm like, ooh, I feel it, I'm like, let go to try and, because it's a natural block. It's
Mm.
really a natural block for me. But when I do, it's like, feels so good afterwards. Feels like I've been holding something down I didn't know. So every time I hear somebody or see somebody who can access tears, I'm like, what a gift to be able to get there.
Truly, but it sounds like you're accessing them, and it's just the practice of, removing that block, because it sounds like it's happening for you. But it's funny because the only place as a kid I did cry was in movies. That was the only time I felt safe enough
Really?
to cry.
Abby, I want to ask you two last things as we close. It's been so much fun interviewing you. Like I've felt extremely comfortable just meeting you on the screen. It's been wonderful. I want to ask you about some of your solutions. Kind of, it's like my first question is kind of like two, right? Solutions and your self-care go-tos.
Solutions. Well, I have a pretty strict self care regime that I do daily when I have time, which is this sounds weird as a person who was raised Jewish, but I get on my knees every morning. I just touch ground and connect. For me, it's with my higher power that I choose to call God, and just it's a reminder because, like, when I wake up in the morning, my head immediately goes like, scans my life. What's wrong? Where's the problem? What do I need to fix today? So that's my default mode. If I get down on my knees right after that, it's a reminder of like, okay, uh, today's not up to me. I just do the next indicated right action. I'm not here to fix anybody's problems or the world's problems. I'm just here to be of service. So I do that, and I say some stuff from programs, some prayers and stuff as a reminder of that. And throughout the day, my head is going back to like all of my crazy shit. But like if I notice that, then I have other tools that I go to. I love writing. I did the artist way, which I found to be incredibly helpful. And I still do my morning pages. You write 3 pages freehand, and I find that really articulates like, oh, what's rattling around up here, like motivating my behavior, and I get to see it in black and white. And then I do a meditation, and like when I'm crazy in production, I don't have the luxury of doing all that stuff, but I'll do like a shortened version. I'll still get on my knees in the morning, and then in the car, even like if I haven't had time to meditate at home, I'll like listen to a guided meditation in the car. So I'll just do it, not perfectly. I work out most days of the week because I find that really helps ground me and again, get whatever is rattling around in my body out. I get great ideas, by the way, by through yoga. It's a great idea factory for me, along with the shower. I connect with people like when stuff is going on. I have a safe little core group of people, a lot of whom I've met through program, who I call when something's up. I've had a few call while we're actually doing this, which always makes me, I've got such a support community. Um, yeah, and then all the modalities I do, go to meetings, go to my therapy. Like I got a whole like committee of people who help keep me sane.
You have a community around you. That's so amazing. And then the types of therapy, is there any specific type that stood out that you did that was like, oh, that helped me through this or that?
Oh my God, I've done so many. And when I was younger, I did HRT, CBT, especially in regard to the hair pulling. Um, got a hair replacement system. Speaking of dimples, I had another one, a fancy one, that worked until it didn't, until I couldn't get it tightened, and during COVID times, and that put me into program. What other therapies I've done? Right now, it's really like in terms of therapy, it's trauma therapy. She's a trauma therapist specializing in. She has a lot of background in narcissistic abuse. I've done plant medicine, which I found really helpful. Um, I'll do metaphysical energy work. I've done that. I've done body work. I mean, I will literally try anything. So, if you have any recommendations, you please feel free to share.
I got a couple. We can definitely talk after. I'm
Okay,
happy to share.
great.
Definitely. The last thing I want to ask you, young lady has trick or hair loss or some kind of, let's keep it to hair. What would be 3 tips you'd give to that person who just has found out and they're just starting on the journey?
It's a great question. I would point them in the direction of TLC. just so they know that they're not alone, and there's how many resources are out there, because it really is a hub for all the different kinds of support groups. 12 step is not for everybody, so there's so many different kinds of support groups. I even found Facebook groups online, so it's really going to TLC, which is a great resource for so many different things. You can learn about studies that are being done. I've done studies, and that feels really good to do, and really helps the science behind, because it's such a not understood disorder at this moment in time, but they're getting there. So TLC, community resources, finding any community, going online and finding a Facebook group to join, just to connect with other people. So you're getting out of the shame of isolation. And yeah, like if you have the resources, like do whatever it takes to like help yourself. Whether I got a hair replacement system, I got laser hair removal for hair I didn't need on my body that was, tempting to pull. I and again, I have the privilege of paying for this stuff. Like I take great care of my skin, so I'm not getting into skin picking. That's a way for me to be a loving parent to myself by taking care of myself in that way.
What a beautiful ending. Loved it. Loved it. But to be a loving parent to myself, you take care of yourself that way. I love it. Abby, thank you so much. Big hugs, big thank yous. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Thanks, James. It's been a huge pleasure.